What is up, everybody? This is Press Text to Start Gamers Digest, a video podcast that is condensing the most important gaming news from this past week into an hour-long meal for you. But this episode, we are doing a review of The Last of Us TV show. But before we get into that, let's introduce ourselves. I am your host, your heavyweight champion from Wishniggerville, California, aka the janitor because we watch niggas, aka not the stepfather, but the father that stepped up, Marcus Ellison.
I am Sean MF Ross.
What do MF stand for?
I'm the real Buggy Turner.
What? Oh,
It'll make sense later.
okay. And who else we got?
Hi, everyone. It's me, Avery. Contractually
Hey.
obligated to be on this podcast.
All right, Marshawn Lynch Jr.
We had contracts?
I'm pretty sure I'm older than him.
I would hope so. But yeah, now that we got that out the way, before we jump into the review, don't forget to support us by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the notification bell. And if you're listening to the podcast, then we would appreciate you leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast service that you're tuned in on. And if you want to join in on our conversations, you can join our Discord at pressx2start.com/Discord. All right. Now, with all those particulars out of the way, I want to give you guys a bit of an episode rundown since, once again, we are doing the Last of Us television show review. So we're going to start off with some individual mini non-spoiler reviews for the season. So kind of just little blurbs from the three of us. And then we're going to jump into spoiler territory, and I'm going to give y'all a moment by the time we get there that if you haven't played the game or watched the full show, that's the moment to get off. But once we're in spoiler territory, we're going to go into our favorite and least favorite episodes, the show performances and how they match up to the game performances, our thoughts on the deviations from and to the game's narrative, if we thought things or what we thought was done better in the show and what we thought was done better in the game, and if what happened in the show changed our feelings on Joel's decision at the end of the game. And then after that, we're just going to give our thoughts and hopes on how the show tackles Last of Us 2 and beyond, and what the show could mean for the future of game adaptations. So, we're going to go into our mini reviews, non-spoiler reviews. So, do you guys want to start, or?
I'll start. For me, this was highly anticipated, and I feel like they hit every mark they were trying for. I think the only thing that I would complain about, which I think was a common complaint, was I wish there was just a little bit more clicker action. And maybe brick and bottle. But from start to finish, I enjoyed the ride.
Gotcha. Avery, do you want to go, or should I go?
I'll go. I am. How would I say this? I enjoyed the show tremendously. I thought it was a great thing. It was great event television, and HBO, Craig Mazin, Neil Druckmann, and the entire crew involved did a fantastic job with the adaptation. That being said, there was a period in the middle of this show where I was not in love with it, where I just thought it was okay, where I thought it was frankly just kind of fine. And like we can talk about that afterward later. But I do think from the beginning to the end, they nailed what is Last of Us, and I'm ultimately satisfied with what I got. But I am not giving the show this is the greatest video game adaptation of all time flowers, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, on my side of things, I think that it is definitely, in terms of just all the TLC that's went into it and the ability to either recreate one-to-one the game or just continue to stick within the feel and tone and world of the game, I think this is the best video game adaptation that we've gotten. And I was in love with the show. It wasn't without, its flaws here and there, which we'll get into, but overall, it's probably the most that I've enjoyed event television in a little while. So, we're about to jump into spoiler territory. So, I'm going to give those of you that are listening or watching a moment to jump off if you don't want to get spoiled. All right. So, let's jump into spoiler territory. So, going around robin, what were you guys' favorite and least favorite episodes of the season? Starting with Avery.
I think my favorite episode is going to be episode 8, the adaptation of the winter chapter and the entire encounter with David. And my least favorite episode would definitely be episode 5. Episode 5, that was like one of my least favorite episodes.
Which one was episode 5?
Episode 5 is when they're hanging out with Sam and Henry
Um,
at the end of that arc.
I got you.
All right, Sean.
I'd have to say, damn, what was that lady's name?
Kathleen.
Yeah, that episode when we finally got the horde just coming out of the ground and her just not being able to let go, and that's what ultimately ended her. I think that was one of my favorite moments. And then least favorite may have been the last one, just because I feel like it went by too fast.
Okay.
Yeah.
For me, my favorite episode, I mean, it's hard because there was no episode that I straight up didn't like, but my favorite might have been 3, just for the sheer audacity of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was a huge risk on their part, and like even if there were episodes that like in terms of just staying within the game and giving us more of Ellie and Joel's story, there were episodes that I might have enjoyed more, but like I feel like that is my favorite just because they stuck the landing on a huge risk.
Yeah, I think. I'm sorry. I think
no,
episode.
and
No, I'm sorry.
okay.
Continue.
Okay,
I think episode. Wow. Okay, we're gonna keep doing this. Episode 3 is the best episode of this series, like hands down from a production, writing, all of that. It is also the most removed from what is Last of Us, which puts it in a weird spot.
And my least favorite episode might be it might be 4, and that's only because 4 was a setup to 5, and so like it was still a great episode of television, but it was definitely like this is all lead up to a big payoff. So I guess if I had to choose, it'd be 4. But yeah, I guess, do you want to go a little deeper into what it was that you loved or hated about the episodes, or do you want to go into the performance talk?
I think we can spend some time. I think my big issue with 5 is that fundamentally, it. I think the deviations towards the narrative of The Last of Us don't serve to make the story better. I see why they made all of the decisions, but I don't think they're better decisions. And I think outside of sort of like, I think the major action set piece of that episode, it was very unsatisfying for me to watch as a fan of the show. To elaborate, what I'm talking about is that I don't think that the people of Kansas City needed to be real people, if that makes sense. I don't think we needed a focal character to focus on, as in Kathleen. We didn't need a Kathleen figure as part of that narrative. I understand what narrative part she serves and what other parts she serves, but I don't necessarily think she needed to be in the show, and that's one of the things that makes her character unsatisfying to me, because it doesn't feel to it doesn't feel like it's helping the narrative. I also don't like the interpretation of Henry and Sam in this episode. I think the Henry character is fine. I think the Sam character is fine. I think both actors did a fantastic job. I think, however, the decision to A, make Sam younger, and B, make him deaf, irreparably changed the dynamic of what those two characters were, for at least for me, in the game. And as a direct result, they no longer work as really strong mirrors of Joel and Ellie. In the game, Henry was Sam's protector. That was it. He didn't let Sam do anything. But Sam was very capable. He was someone who was capable. He was someone who was capable of being as capable as Ellie. And ultimately, it's Henry's inability to let Sam live, essentially, and like live in this world is what ultimately gets Sam killed. Here, it's more or less that it's just a fate. It's just a cruel fate that's visited upon him. It's no one's. It's frankly no one's real fault. Sam was bit in the chaos of that at the end of that episode. It was no one's fault, which to me ultimately makes the death feel less tragic, because it's one of those things where in the game I can see the correlation of Sam's death being Henry's fault. In the show, I can't see that, and it's just a tragic fate problem of the show.
Where I disagree on that is I think game Sam and Henry was more of a spotlight or a cautionary tale for Joel. I feel like the show was more impactful to Ellie. And so for me, it wasn't necessarily that it did it worse, it just did it different. Because for me, the Sam Henry death was more tragic in the show. I mean, it was definitely tragic in the game, but like my heart broke when um just given what we had seen with Ellie and Ellie and Sam in the show, and watching Ellie try to like be useful, and knowing what I know about how the future of the story goes in the second game, and seeing how that exact moment plays directly into some of her decisions later, it it broke my heart. Like I thought that was one of the more effective changes from the game to the show, but
I
I
think
definitely see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think the changes towards Ellie knowing about Sam at the very end are actually fantastic, and they're the only thing that make the making Sam younger actually makes sense to me as a creative decision. But it's ultimately in the relationship with Henry and Sam where I sit there and question, like, why was this decision made? I feel it makes the characters a little bit weaker, and I wanted to see more of Sam as a character, and because of the new nature of him as a character, he fundamentally feels like an NPC and less of a character, if that makes sense.
It
To a
does.
degree, I think, I guess to just push back again, I think that one of my things with the role that they play in the show as opposed to the game is, yes, in the game they're blatantly supposed to be a mirror to Joel and Ellie. In the show, I kind of like that they're not, because it was kind of refreshing to see Henry treat his little brother like a person. Not saying that like Henry in the game didn't treat Sam like a person, but he was so very like he was so much like Joel was with Ellie, whereas like I can't have you running off, I can't have you doing this. And it's
Yeah.
understandable, absolutely understandable. But it was nice to kind of see moments in the show where like Henry was honest, like, yeah, they probably killed the guy that you know, was helping us, and so we're going to have to adjust. And he kind of trusted Sam enough to adapt, or trusted Sam enough to be able to move with him. And I kind of appreciated that difference in the show.
I I see all of that, and my thing to that is I think that is a consequence of Sam just being younger. It's less
Mm.
believable for Sam to be an Ellie archetype at
At that
7 or 8
age.
years old instead of like 12 in the game. So like
Isn't it though? He's black.
the entire pick a struggle. You can be deaf or black. That's a bad joke. I apologize.
Wow.
That's really bad. No, but to be serious, when I found out he was deaf, that was my first reaction. Wow, gotta pick a struggle. Also, he had cancer. That's you gotta pick a struggle right here. This show is way too dark for
Trifecta.
this. But no,
Hey,
in all seriousness, I just like I just I think it's very much a victim of what I felt was like, for everything we're talking about, all those
Yeah.
choices. work perfectly. They're not bad choices, but I don't necessarily
Yeah.
think in the character arc of Last of Us, and we'll get to some other critiques, that it was the perfect. It wasn't the because like it was a perfect switch. If that makes sense. It also,
Yeah. Yeah. I do think in the grand scheme of the season, the choices with the Henry part of it were probably the weakest. I'm not nearly as low on Kathleen as a lot of people are, and I actually I love the actress
no,
Melanie
the actress is
Linsky.
fucking The actress is
Yeah,
fantastic.
I love her, and I actually love what Kathleen means for the future of the show more than I did for the season itself.
What do
But
you
we
think it
can get
means
to
for the
that
future
later.
of the show?
She's basically Last of Us 2 Ellie. Like
Mm.
that whole scene where she was
If
talking
Ellie had an
about
army,
what's the point of, well, yeah, but it's like that whole scene where she was talking about what's the point of forgiveness and all that. I'm like, that's literally Ellie in Last of Us 2. Like that's straight up her.
There's a little bit different context to that, and we'll get to that later.
No,
But
yeah,
yeah,
of course. But it's just like I was sitting there
I
watching her do
I
that.
get with the Last of Us 2 being about hate and like that her arc being the evolution of love to hate. I get what you're saying, but it's like ultimately with me and her character, it was just one of those things where like she doesn't make sense here.
Mm.
And it makes the people of Kansas City seem less, at least for me as I'm watching it, a less of an intimidating force, and not because she's not an intimidating figure, but more that like one of her first on-screen decisions is, oh, we have no doctor in this place. This doctor betrayed me, so I'm going to shoot him. So we have no doctor. And then her second big thing is, oh, there's something going on in the basement. I care more about Henry than I care about dealing with what's going on in this basement. So we're just going to move on from that.
And I mean, like, I get my thing is I I think she absolutely makes sense in the world. It's just that she is indicative of being blinded
Yeah.
by like being one track minded and how that can cost
Yeah.
you everything because I think that I actually love what the people of Kansas City meant in terms of like what does it look like to see people on the other end of like okay, we've been oppressed for so long and so once we get the opportunity to flip the switch, we're going to do what we got to do and like it's like the dark version of freedom. And I appreciated them kind of exploring that aspect because usually it's revolutionary group good and fascism bad, which in a lot of cases, yes, but usually it's very black and white. And I
Yeah.
appreciated them going that way with it.
Like my last thought on the Kathleen thing is ultimately, I feel like if you removed her character from those 2 episodes, it's not changing anything of the story. And that's my sort of like my big issue with her inclusion is that I didn't feel like it was the best choice. And it could, and I think it also is in. I don't necessarily think it was the best choice for what the narrative needed. I understand why they put her here, and we'll get to that. But I don't think I don't think it was the accent point of the show, an accent point, and more like an interesting detour that can work. It worked for some people. It just didn't work for me.
That's fair. That's fair. Um, so do you want to talk, since we were talking more about the gripe, do you want to talk more about like the high points of one of the episodes or the episodes that you loved, or do you want to just go into performance talk?
Well, my high point is the performance song. I think
Okay.
that Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey are at this point picture perfect images of Ellie and Joel to me. Like Pedro was always a Mando. I've seen Pedro gruffly in other roles. I get this.
Wonder
It
Woman.
works. Yeah, like this is like a 1-to-1. Then he nails it as Joel, and I'm like, you get to that episode 6 monologue with him and Tommy, and I'm like, ooh, this man is in his Duffy in terms of like just acting right now.
Oh.
But Bella was a slow burn. When
Mm.
her Ellie was so different from what I remember of Ashley Johnson's Ellie, and I played this game multiple times. So like I have a clear understanding of what this character is. She was filled with this sort of like anger and feralness and violence. I don't I see for lots with to Ellie because of the shit that's happened to her there. But I don't really see for normal Ellie, and it took me to Left Behind really to get where all of this is coming from, and like Left Behind, I'd already bought into her as a character by that time, but Left Behind episode 7 when she's like breaking everything in the store and screaming no no no. That's when I really like I get it. I get it perfectly. This is like I hear Ellie now. I hear Ashley. Like I hear Ashley. When I hear Ellie's voice, I hear Ashley Johnson. But that episode was the episode where I was like, I can start hearing Bella Ramsey now.
Yeah, I think I've been somebody who has always, as much as I loved Ellie, like she was my surrogate daughter when I was playing the first round. I remember when The Last of Us 2 came out and people were like, where is all of this coming from? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because
You mean all the violence?
Yes, because I'm like, just because I think it's a symptom of, not symptom, but it's a result of the game being she's an active part of the storytelling, but in actual gameplay, she's kind of just there. So since as Joel in the game, you're doing most of the killing and all that stuff.
You still there to witness it.
Right. But even outside of that, it's like I can see how somebody playing the game would be like, Ellie's my little baby angel, and she would never. But I'm like, no, this is a little girl who is capable of great violence, but because it's a video game and she's a side character in the video game in terms of the gameplay, I can see how there's a disconnect. To me, in the show, we finally get to see what I've been seeing of her in the games since Jump, where I'm like, there is a darkness inside of her that is bubbling under the surface, and it only gets exacerbated by threats to her or those she loves safety. And I loved pretty much all of the performances in this show, but to me, Bella Ramsey was the star of this show. Like, especially when we get later into the season, like straight up episodes 7 to 9 are just Bella Ramsey killing it.
Yeah,
like
they're fantastic.
Yeah, like Bella was destroying it in those last episodes. But Pedro and his take on Joel, it was really interesting to me I remember when the trailer came out and they showed that little section of him doing the "you have no idea what loss is," and it tripped me out how much he sounded like Troy Baker in that moment.
Troy Baker doing a Texan accent.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was like, okay. So he's gonna be like, he's gonna put his own swing on it, but he's gonna really feel like the game Joel. But what I love
both
about
of them peeked at the game before.
Yeah.
Filming, so
yeah,
they had a frame of reference.
So they weren't completely uninitiated, which makes sense.
I think Pedro's performance is divorced from Troy, if that makes sense.
No, that's what I was about to say. My favorite thing about Pedro's take on Joel is because it's a video game, and I'm going to keep going back to this point. Because of the video game, it's kind of easy to forget sometimes that Joel is old. So you get to do things that are like kind of Herculean because it's a video game. I love that The Last of Us show is like, nah, this man's old and he's been surviving for a very long time. So he's like half deaf. He's got bad knees. He's probably got arthritis. Like, there's elements of him where it's like he's still a fucking killer. And because he's at 56, moments where he's still absolutely a menace makes you terrified of what he was,
because he don't have time to stretch out this goddamn fight. You need to die right now.
Exactly. So it makes you wonder if he's that much of a menace now, sometimes not even at full strength. What was this nigga like when he was 36 out in these streets?
Like 3 or 4 years into the pandemic.
I wouldn't want to run up to that dude. So I love that Joel's take or Pedro's take is like a much older, worn down Joel, but you never lose sight of that danger there. What about you, Sean?
Are we talking favorite performances?
Yeah, yeah. Or like how the performance is stacked up to you to the game performances.
I was a detractor of Bella Ramsey at first when it was first announced, just like everybody else. Like, not my Ellie hashtag, but I know it didn't make sense, Avery. I was running with the crowd, but after
I just
hearing
want to
her,
clarify when you say like everyone else, I'm not part of that everyone else.
I don't mean everyone else. I mean the general consensus of the internet when it's like, she don't look like Ellie, you know. But I heard her curse that first time in the hallway. Get the fuck, you know. I was like, all right, this is it right here. She sounds just like her. This is fine. I like that they kept Marlene. That was crazy. I understand why they couldn't keep Ashley Johnson. She's too old now, and Troy Baker just doesn't look like him. But their performances were solid. There was never a time where I felt like I'm not enjoying this. You know what I mean? I wanted to see more. I wish there was more than 9 episodes. Of course, Nick Offerman just destroyed that role, and I love all the rage that episode 3 got. Oh,
Not my
man.
Frank, and I'm like, did you play the game?
No.
Well,
I mean,
you said Frank and
Bill.
I'm sorry,
Bill
not
and
my
Frank.
Bill.
If you didn't pay attention in the game, though, I'm wondering like if it went over people's head, and this was like boom, right in your face.
Oh, it absolutely did go over people's heads.
100%. The only way you know that Bill is gay is when Ellie pulls out the mag and then, oh, Bill has gay porn. That recontextualizes everything he says about my partner Frank.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I like that they just put it out there, like, you know, deal with it. This show is representing everybody in the post-apocalyptic world. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. No, yeah. Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett both were fantastic in that episode. I also want to just give a special shout out to the way that they implemented every, I guess, principal voice actor / mocap actor in the original game in the show. I love the fact that they brought those guys over and gave them a prime time prestige
Something
television
to do that wasn't
look.
just a clicker.
Exactly. Like it gave them something, because pretty much all of those actors are predominantly
actual stage actors.
Yeah, but you wouldn't know it because they all got their biggest roles on video games and voice acting. And so it was really cool to see them get a chance to like showcase what they're about in front of a film camera. I thought that was great. I especially loved what they did with Ashley Johnson. That was some perfect.
It's an inspired choice that I have a major problem with, but it was such an inspired choice. Yeah. You want me to get into it?
One second. Yeah, because that I guess takes us directly into thoughts on deviations and new additions to the game's narrative. So go ahead.
Okay. I love making Ashley Johnson Ellie's mother. I love being able to see her. I love how we can see Ellie's birth. What I didn't love is getting the answer to why Ellie's immune. I also didn't love how. I also didn't love because it's a twofold thing. I also didn't love Marlene being involved in any way, shape, or form with Ellie's birth in any shape or form. If that makes sense, because it gets into a lot of my problems at the end of the show. Where like, oh, we know why Ellie's immune. Oh, this pregnant woman was bit while having a baby.
Mm-hmm.
We know how, and now now that Marlene knows that Ellie is immune, she's like, oh, we know the factors in which this is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So you could try to replicate it. Yeah, they should have left it a mystery. I get it.
Well,
because I mean, you could just go do some more science and replicate that.
Like if the Fireflies are so cruel to want to kill Ellie to solve all the world's issues, then at this point there's no.
Well,
There's no
I
morals
don't.
in doing this to other people. If that makes sense to me.
I don't think that they were the Fireflies were a lot of things, but I don't think that they were like just
Didn't have any morals.
hungry to kill Ellie. I feel
I mean,
like it was.
here's a big deviation I hate about the Fireflies in this final episode, and one of the things that little annoys me about this one. While doing the underwater bus sequence, I guess is a bit too extensive for what they want to do for this television. It accomplishes two things. It knocks out Joel and it knocks out Ellie. So that when we get to the final moments where the Fireflies decide they're going to operate on Ellie, there's never a question in which if Ellie had a choice in this matter. Here, she's not knocked out. Marlene pretty much says, oh, we just chose not to tell her so she wouldn't be scared. And then just going along with it afterwards. So Marlene and them have robbed Ellie from of this choice as well.
I'm gonna be real with you.
I thought they didn't explain it in the game as well.
I always thought that was the case in the game too.
No,
like I know she was already knocked out, but
in the game, Ellie is knocked out when Joel asked her. Marlene's like, "Oh, we just took her straight to surgery."
I don't think in the game they told Ellie that they were gonna crack open her brain.
No,
what I'm trying to say is she was knocked out.
They never explained to Ellie the consequences of what was going to happen to her.
Okay, agreed.
In the game and the show, both of those never happened. But in the game, she's knocked out. They just move forward with it. But in the show,
which to me is a little more cruel though. Like they just took her prone body and threw her on the table. Like that's kind of a fuck.
Well, in the context of Last of Us Part 2, like I like sort of give you more context of how that happens. But like in the context of the show, it's one of those things where like, especially when you get to the end of that sequence and Marlene's like, Joel, you're not giving her the choice to make. And I'm like, bitch, you didn't give the choice to make. What are we talking about here?
She also didn't murder everybody in the like, I mean
it was deserved.
I will say this because
but bring it back to the Ashley stuff.
Yeah. I liked the Marlene thing with her and Anna because it mirrored Riley and Ellie to me so much. So I was watching it and I was like, it's like watching Ellie and Riley grown up. It's kind of trippy. But I like knowing because I've always wanted to know. But that's just my thing.
Yeah, I think it's better for the narrative if it's just a random mutation. Like it's just an unknown factor that makes Ellie special instead of something that could feasibly be replicated.
Yeah. I will say this though, because go ahead, Sean.
I was gonna say, now that they showed it, why does Marlene need Ellie? It removes why you need Ellie because they can just get people and try to replicate this.
Well, because she was immune because her mother got bit and she didn't cut the umbilical cord in time.
Exactly.
So would that mean that you have to get pregnant women and kill them? Why would you do like?
But it's one of those things.
Why not?
But it's why not? If Ellie is so important that you're going to fight tooth and nail to get her brain for the cure, there's like no.
What's stopping you from doing it to other people? They're still serving up one for the many. Why not do that?
I know, but
it's fucked up. It's messed up.
It's fucked.
Because like
we have gotten this far, Marcus, in the real world with effed up science like that.
No, I agree about that. I'm just saying that, like, to me, if you have a live immune person who's been immune for a while, and it's like, okay, because also at a certain point, I don't even know if they knew that she was just going to straight up possibly die from the immunity thing. And I'm talking about the show. Yeah. I'm talking about the show. And so for me, like, instead of getting a bunch of pregnant women and then having them get bit and then just like, I just think that is so. Like,
Marcus,
I understand this.
They're no longer in the civilized world anymore. You have to do what you could do to try to figure out how to
get back to the Anna thing.
Of course.
Get back to the Anna thing. That ultimately is why I don't like them giving us an answer and Marlene being involved in the birth so much, because it opens up those questions. When in the game, it was just so much cleaner that we don't know what we're doing. Even the doctor's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but this could be our only shot. Here it's like, nah, we know exactly what we need to do to make the cure. Marlene tells Joel she got these receptors in her brain that we just need to culture and copy, and then we can make a cure for everyone. Like, I think as someone who loves having an answer for everything, I don't think they need an answer for this.
I'll just only say my only pushback is using a bunch of pregnant people. I feel like that's a nuclear option that if the trying to make a culture doesn't work, then maybe you start doing that. But I feel like going with Ellie first is the right way to go about it, where it's like we already have an immune person. Like
Marcus,
one of the things that
means you gotta die too.
Look, man, if Joe want to come for me, like
don't Marcus, I love you too much to wish that upon you. There's nothing stopping Joel from killing you,
look,
bro.
I'm just saying.
Joel is dead.
I would hope one of y'all. will go over it after that.
Nah, man.
Killing me.
You already know how I feel about.
You already know how I feel
about certain people.
Yes.
You already know how I feel about certain people. I'm not. That smoke's not happening.
But yeah. That's neither here nor there. I just say that it is interesting now to see where they're going to go with that exact thing. Are there any other like deviations or additions that you were really rocking with? Like we already talked about how fantastic Frank and the Bill story was.
So I got two. That couple up in the mountains right before they got to Tommy's settlement. I love them. I just love how just nonchalant the wife was, just like,
yeah,
you made him food? Yeah, he didn't hurt me. I can see that. And then Ellie comes in there cussing, and the old man's just like, Jesus. And the old woman is just like, I like her. It's just...
Yeah, they were fantastic. I wanted like
a little bit more of them.
I wanted like a short film just with them just chilling in the apocalypse. I loved them. They were fantastic.
And then oh, go ahead, Avery.
No, you continue.
The intro to it. Just to show how grounded, like, this could feasibly happen, something similar to this. It's not 100% realistic, but put on your thinking caps. And I think that I watched it with my wife, Drea, of course, and she's just like, damn, this really is very grounded. As well as the scientist, where the guy asks her, what can we do? Bomb. Just kill it all, because there's nothing you can do. It just drove home that severity for me.
Yeah. So going through my nitpicks, like a lot of them are just minor things, like stuff that me and you have already talked about. I don't want to belabor, but like one of my major nitpicks is that I feel like we got this cool establishment of the fungal network in episode 2, and what that means, and then we just never heard about it ever again.
We did in episode 5, but that was it.
Yeah, and I that's like a weird nitpick I have for the show, where I'm like, oh, there's like we made this big change that removes something that's such a focal part of the narrative about like the mask and all of that and all the cool sequences. Like I'm still thinking about the sequence in season 2, what's going to happen in the season 2 sequence when Ellie has to go into the fungal the spore thing with a broken mask, and Dina freaks out, which I already figured freaks out, and like they can't really do the I'm immune because I don't need the mask thing anymore.
She's probably getting bit or something.
She's probably just gonna get bit.
Yeah. We're just like, okay, she's just gonna keep getting bit and not getting torn to pieces. Okay, that's the thing we're just going to do because we don't have the spores.
I mean, one of the things
I'm not angry about the spores. I just want to make that clear.
No, yeah. That's just one thing that I didn't think about going into making the show, where there are blatantly certain things. Like The Last of Us is one of the few games that, because the game itself is so cinematic, you don't even think about certain things that they still need to consider. Like it seems like it would be easy to like 1-to-1 because it's so cinematic. But then certain things really do just work better in video game circumstances than they do in television shows. And that was one of the things that I wasn't even thinking about. But yeah, no, I am right there with you in regards to both of you. Actually, I loved the Native American couple. They were great. And I also
Remember when he
I
was in the what was that sci-fi show?
Defiance.
Yeah, remember? Yeah,
Yeah,
Race McCully. That show was a
I
weird
love
ending.
that for him. It did. It really did. But and then I'm also there with you, Avery, in terms of like I get why there wasn't a lot of clickers in the show because once again, video game. But I wish we could have
Yeah,
seen some
I
more
really
of
yeah
them.
I really like you created this, like you took out the spores and you created this fungal network thing, which I think is super cool. I really just wish they had done a little bit more with it. And I understand
Yeah.
why
Absolutely,
they didn't. But like to
absolutely.
counter all of my
Mm,
uh, to
okay.
counter all of my gripes, the thing I give this show an A+ for is the music. Like
Oh yeah,
straight up, the fact that they just ripped The Last of Us one soundtrack and put it in the show and it works perfectly 1-to-1. Like episode 5, for as much as I hated it, when when Joel crouches down and they play the Last of Us stealth sting for like when you're in
yeah,
stealth mode and you're being observed and like you're close. I'm like, this 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 is perfect. This is so fucking good.
yeah. I'll say that like Gustavo killed it. Like all throughout the season. My favorite piece of music that he did, I think, in the season was the whole Terminator march through the hospital with when Joel was just laying waste to the compound. I thought that was so sinister and so well done. It was beautiful. But Gustavo killed it
Where Joel
throughout,
probably killed more fireflies than I actually did playing the game.
right? Straight up. Like, yeah. And we'll get to that. I promise. But I one change that I really did and it's one change the one change about finding out why Ellie's immune that I liked because it made me think about something is that it's not actually no, it wasn't knowing what we know. It was the moment with Riley and Ellie. It made me think about how many people could have also been immune and didn't know it and got killed. You know, like because there's no way that Ellie is the first immune person or the only immune person to ever exist in this
Well,
world. So
specifically,
it makes me
how we
just
know she was how we know how she was made immune. Yeah, on paper she the release has to be someone or other out there.
right. And so it has me like it's so tragic to think that like could potentially have been dozens of immune people, but because of the way that this world works, they either got killed before they could find out or killed themselves because that wasn't a possibility. So that was something that I really appreciated in terms of just that new aspect of it. But
We got
okay,
a lot.
good.
I'm sorry, we got a lot of conversations. Is there anything that you didn't like about from an adaptation standpoint?
Um, I think that I don't know. I don't know how they would have stretched the story. It's one of those things where a lot of the decisions they made I really liked. I think it really just comes down to I think it really just comes down to the clickers being a thing because when we got the clickers, they were really effective.
Episode 2 and
Like
episode 5.
yeah, like episode no, well yeah, episode not just the clickers but like the infected. So like episode 1, episode 2 and episode 5 when we got them, they were really unsettling. Like 2 when we first meet the clickers, that was some primo stuff, and then that horde moment in 5 scared the shit out of me. Like that was the only moment in the show that made me jump because I was not expecting that many infected to come out of that hole. I was not prepared for that, and that scared the hell out of me. But I
think
wish
they
you would
used
have
the
got a
motion
little.
caption actors for the actual clickers in the game, didn't they? For most
Yeah,
of them?
I think they brought back some of the performers who did the mocap for that. But I think that I wish we would have just got a bit more with them because as much as this show did great work with the drama and showing the human element of the decay of society of the apocalypse, we've also established that the infected are a problem. And while I think in certain places they did a good job of explaining why they're not really there or they're not much of a threat, there's other places where I was like, I feel like we could have used like a little infected fight or a little clicker fight.
Okay,
You know, I
that is a
know.
minor criticism I had, but I don't think it's a major one. Is that I do think the show's in it like one of my minor criticisms is that because of the pacing of the show, there doesn't feel like a lot of Joel and Ellie time in comparison to the game, where you spend a lot of that
Mm.
time down like you spend a lot of that time interacting with enemies in various forms. I do feel that they could have had a bit more of the game's more interesting set pieces in the game, in the show. If that
No,
makes sense.
yeah. No, yeah. No, I absolutely believe or I absolutely agree with you on that. There was a couple of moments where I was like, we could have like I would have personally liked to see David and Ellie fighting off those infected. I get why it's
Yeah.
not there, but I would have liked to see that. I knew we probably weren't gonna get the tunnel scene in the final part of the game. I just figured that like
Like
that's not
a minor thing. I'm so upset that the only reference we got to Ellie's inability to swim was that one sequence, and there's not even a mention of Joel having to put her on a pallet and push her somewhere. I just needed that.
that. No, yeah, I do. That's one Easter egg I was hoping for, and we didn't get, and I was like, oh, I guess. But no, yeah, that I knew that tunnel scene wasn't going to happen because it just didn't. A lot about it is not feasible. But yeah, I just would have liked a little bit more. But oh, Sean, what were you gonna say?
Or we could have used at some point in the game, Joel realized I'm gonna have to let her shoot some people. When he first was going through a clearing and she had to cover him with the rifle, and that's the first time he gave her a rifle. Like he showed her how to shoot in the show, but it was under different circumstances. I think in the game she had to cover him so he could get across
in
clearing.
the business center. It's when you're in the quote unquote. It's the sequences match up what they do in the show in the game, but in the game it's Joel having to sneak through the business center and he puts her up on some scaffolding and like gives her a gun. This is already after she's already shot and killed a man to save him. So this is just him trusting her to do this. They don't do that in the show, which I understand. But then it gets to another thing. So you didn't do that sequence, but you also kept the sequence of Joel having to sneak through a neighborhood to kill a guy kill a sniper in the sequence, kill the sniper.
Yeah. I just feel like it would have been a precursor to her season 2 violence. But go ahead.
I will say that I think that removing some of the fights makes the moments where violence is used feel more impactful because I'm not gonna lie to you, I probably would have got a little numb to it if we just kept mowing down faceless people in the show, where I just been like, okay, yeah, this is just another day in the apocalypse. Like it would have become less impactful for me. I can't speak for everybody else, but it would have just kind of
I'm with you as well. I didn't need a. I'm not the guy sitting here saying we need a fighting episode. Like the things I'm like talking like the big action sequence, like the big set pieces I'm talking about are less involving actual fighting enemies and more just like interesting set pieces, like Joel being upside down. Like you didn't need to find him. He didn't need to fight enemies. I just needed that sequence, if that makes sense.
I agree. Like that would have been cool because we know that happened in the Bill section of the game, and since they shifted the Bill section, it would have been cool to put it.
And another thing was like Joel boosting Ellie up in the segments. A minor setback I have about the final episode is that for the first time they do that, or boosting her up so she pull down the ladder, but it's in the game. It's the last time they do that in the game, and where it's where you don't get that interaction where like she throws the ladder down because he wants to see the graph.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. Because we've
yeah.
No, I was gonna say because we've sort of already talked about certain things that we liked better in the show and in the game. So actually, I kind of want to just jump into how if the show changed how we felt about Joel's decision at all.
No. Put a gun in my hand. I'm ready.
So you were still riding with Joel mowing down the Fireflies.
As Neil Druckmann said, once you have a child, it all makes sense. I have said this for years. Children make you do irrational shit.
Mm-hmm.
Point blank. That's all.
What about you, Avery?
My opinion has never changed about Joel and Ellie and the Fireflies and all that. I think that I'm not a parent. I can't sit here and say what I would do as a father or as a caregiver of someone else. However, I do know that in the Joel's situation and spending time with Ellie and my own my own feelings for Ellie as a character, I would make the same decision 10 out of 10 with him. Like there's no world I would have. The only world where I would not have made that decision is if Ellie knew going into this is what she wants. But that's not a decision she was given by anyone.
Yeah. I am still of the mind that everything that Joel did makes absolute sense with everything we know about Joel and the circumstance that happened.
Yeah.
I don't believe for a second, and I've heard people say this and I don't believe them. I don't believe for a second that if Joel would have heard Marlene say that they gave her a choice and Marlene still and Ellie said she still wants to go through it, I don't believe for a second. Exactly.
Joel's the type of man who wanted
absolutely. Yeah. There's no fucking way. He's not able to and it's understandable, but he's not able to see past his grief. Yeah. So
well, not even his grief, it's his love. Because at that point,
his love, of course, but also like he can't lose another daughter.
You can't lose
like he won't. Yeah, exactly. And so I don't believe for a second that he would have let that pass regardless. And so I understand why Marlene was kind of like, we got to get him out of here. I understand why she did it. I don't respect that she didn't give Ellie the choice.
Marlene's so.
I don't respect that at all.
I love Merle. I love Marlene, the character. Man, this is once again reinforced. Man, Marlene is dope as fuck.
But it's like, I do think that like, if there's anything that the show did for me with Joel's decision, it is reinforce everything that's about to happen.
Well,
like
if one of the big things that this show does that the game doesn't is, and we had this argument a bit, is that the show removes a lot of the subtlety of Joel's final decision from the narrative. In the game, it's subtext. When you get to the end, we're all interpreting how we feel and all of these things about the very end. In the show, every episode has a line or a brand new scene or something that just reinforces the decision that Joel has at the end, and it gets to I'm sure I mentioned this. How I feel like this is a director's cut of Neil trying to solve one of these big annoyances about the first Last of Us. Is that a lot of the early conversations about this wasn't that Joel was the bad guy, and this was Neil trying to say no. This is a bad world with bad people. Joel made a decision. Whether it's good or bad is up to your interpretation. But this is why he did it.
Well, I still think that calling Joel the bad guy exists in a binary regardless. Like, there are no heroes in this world. Like, it's there, there are people who are better than others for sure, but like it's a broken world. And so I don't think Joel is a quote unquote bad guy. I just think that
I think Joel has done bad things. I think
absolutely.
I think he's done horrible things. He's also done horrible things while under my control. But
Yeah. I think Joel is a broken man. And one of the things that like I keep going back to is yes, he did a lot of what he did for Ellie and out of love, but let's not forget the 20 years where he was just doing fucked up shit for nobody but himself and his survival. Like, let's not act like he's
he's
Papa
doing it
Bear
for,
of the year,
he's doing it for
you
Tommy,
know.
but it's
Well, yeah, but I'm
yeah,
just saying, like, it's Joel is the villain of a lot of other people's story.
yes.
Like, so what happens to him is not it was never surprising to me, but after the show, I can't listen to somebody like watch what's about to happen and be like, where does this come from? It like I'm like, there's no fucking way that you
I
could
think we
watch
should just
what just
we should
happened.
we should just at this point we should just transition to the next part of our
Yeah,
conversation. Yeah,
yeah.
because this is gonna be a spoilers for Last of Us Part 2 conversation right here. But like everything about the way Last of Us Part 2 opens makes perfect sense for all those characters and what they've done and how they
Mm-hmm.
and everything and all that with Joel. What's going to be interesting is how season 2 of this show is going to reconcile with the theme of Last of Us Part 2. And what I mean is I have long since thought when this show got greenlit and like it started getting popular and they're like, oh, we're going to do season 2. We and you had this argument about what season 2 was going to be. You were of the mindset that it was going to be sort of a mini Last of Us 1.5 and started to stretch things out and give more context. I was more along the lines that I think Last of Us 2 is such a fucking big game that you can split that bitch in two, add a couple more scenes in to rearrange some shit so like it doesn't have to be this most action heavy sort of a thing that you can do on television and still tell a coherent narrative. They've all but said they're going to do that. And so now the question is, are they going to be able to sell the Abby character as the part 2 like protagonist, especially when you cannot force an audience to play that section, if that makes sense.
I will say that like when I was of the mindset that they might possibly do like a Last of Us 1.5 for a section of season 2, that was also way before I even knew. I wasn't sure how exactly they were going to fully go about tackling season 1. But after post season 1 and seeing how they kind of actually got through that, you know, my give or take taking some things out, I'm like, oh no, I absolutely see them doing Last of Us 2 straight up. They'll probably do some things different, of course, because that's what they've done so
Last of
far.
Us Part 2 is
But
so big, there's going to be a lot of things they're going to have to rejigger, especially when watching season 1, they're not completely interested in doing one-to-one in terms of the plot beats. They're interested in doing one-for-one with the thematic beats, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if they got a good budget for the first season, but I wouldn't be surprised if they got an even bigger one and a bigger scope for the second season because of how successful the show's been.
That being said, we will not see the Seraphites walking in the clouds. That's not going to be in the show.
Yeah, of course. As long as we get the Rat King, we'll be good. But I'll say that like
CGI that shit.
No, there's probably going to be a mixture of practical and CG like they did with the bloater. Especially because of how far makeup and VFX have come. I wouldn't be surprised.
It depends on what they're trying to do with the action. If they're trying to make it a straight horror sequence, it's going to be some sort of practical animatronic thing. But if they're actually trying to make it an action sequence, it kind of has to be CG.
What do you mean CGI with the bloater?
The bloater was a practical suit that was enhanced by visual effects after the fact.
Okay,
yeah. But yeah, like Last of Us, the way they handle Last of Us 2 is it's going to be interesting from a television standpoint because one, like you said, the audience won't have the ability to play the section of Abby's story, so they're really going to have to work to make her character work.
The big fear is we get a Walking Dead situation where you introduce Negan as a character, and then apparently there was a massive drop off in viewership after Negan did the thing he did. And so like I think Last of
But
Us. I think the first half of season 1 will sustain itself on as the revenge story that it is. But when you get to the second half, and will it be able to sustain? Will the audience be able to sustain itself after that?
here's two things. Here's two things I'll say to that. One, this is even riskier than the Negan thing because Negan didn't kill Rick. Like, this is essentially Pedro Pascal is one of the biggest actors on the planet. And a good chunk of the reason why people came, it's not lost on me that a big chunk of the reason why a lot of people probably came up for this show was because, oh, Daddy Pedro in another daddy role, so the fact that they're going to kill Joel probably very early, maybe even episode 1.
No, if they're following the same logic, Joel will die at the end of episode 1 of season
No,
2.
I agree. Because I don't know. I'm just saying maybe until we see it.
Marcus,
But
I want you to look me in the virtual eyes and trust me, as I perfectly predicted season 1 that they're going to kill Joel at the end of episode 1 of season 2.
did you perfectly predict season 1?
We had the conversation. It's why we had the back and forth. Sorry, Sean.
I feel bad for whoever they choose to be Abby because the person who played Abby in the game is still getting death threats, and they didn't kill Pedro Pascal.
Yeah.
They killed Troy. People don't like Troy. So
that whole situation is to this day it still pisses me off. But yeah, so they have that. It's a big risk on their part because Joel or Pedro is going to basically be out of the show for the most part, except for like inevitable flashback scenes and other stuff. But like
that's
him
why
as
he
an
signed up
active
for the
force,
show.
Because
he knew that there wasn't going to be a long-term commitment. I could do this one season and a few more episodes and be done. I was going to be locked in for years.
Yeah. And so it's gonna be interesting to see how people receive that or are able to take that. And in terms of like how they split it, I'm of the mind that season 2 and 3, just because of how big the game is, even with rejiggering certain things in the story, you still have a lot of story there. I feel like season 2 and 3 have to be about Last of Us 2. Like, I feel like you can't.
They've already all but said that. They've all but said that.
Okay.
Season 2 and 3 are just going to be Last of Us 2. And I think
okay.
where they end too. This is the thing I'm not sure of, but I'm trusting my gut and my TV writing abilities, which are non-existent, that this is how they're going to end season 2. They're going to end it with, "We gave you another shot. We let you live, and you threw it away."
That's what I was thinking too. I was thinking that would be the way that they close off season 2, and then we jump into season 3 with the rest of it. But I mean, that'd be a hell of a cliffhanger as well. It's just it's going to be interesting
the ultimate cliffhanger, because it's like, oh no, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to Ellie?
Joel, then Ellie.
Then season 3 opens up, and you're just Abby rolling around. I'm like, wait, what?
I do hope.
Good writing.
I do hope that they just go ahead and greenlight season 3 too, so that they can like film those back to back, because I'm worried about like if they end up filming season 2 and let season 2 be that thing, and then they have time off, and then time off is important, but I'm saying like if there's like a significant gap between season 2 and 3.
Here's the other problem.
It's going to be
what you're talking about, and why I don't think they're going to put that. They're not going to film it back to back. Last of Us 3 doesn't exist right now.
Yeah, of course.
If Last of Us 3 gets made and it debuts, we probably don't see that game till 2028. At the current rate of how they make the show and how they produce seasons, if they do season 2 and 3 back to back and release them year after year, then there's like 4 or 5 seasons of no Last of Us. I mean, 4 or 5 years of no Last of Us until 3 gets made, and then they can adapt that.
I mean, when are they planning to start filming and release season 2, though?
I don't know. I have no idea. What I'll say to that is
filming season 2, if this makes sense, at the end of this year, and then we'll get then it'll probably have another year and a half of production before we get it 2 years from now.
What I will say though is, because you're right, I do agree with you on that, but they technically don't need Last of Us 3 to straight up be out to do what they're going to do with the story, because literally Neil is I'm just saying
I
Neil
know the
is
technicality, but I've heard Neil in interviews say we're not doing what if we're going to tell the story of Last of Us 3, we're going to tell it in its video game form. We're not going to Game of Thrones it. We told Craig Mazin what we plan to do, and then we're going to make Last of Us 3 before the game comes out. They've all said they're not going to do that.
All right, fair enough. So, with that, what is this show, or what could the show mean for the future of game adaptations? What do you guys think?
Avery, you want to?
It means that every other game adaptation that isn't Arcane is on notice. Like, you can't, like, it also puts everything on notice and puts everything that came out beforehand on the worst platform of all time. Like, you can't do what you did with Halo. You can't do what you did with any other the Resident Evil franchise. You can't do what you did with any of those other properties. You have to, like, this. Not only was this a near one-for-one adaptation of the game, it was also made in partnership with the people who made the game. It was so critically successful that it is a major success. It also, like, my big fear now that this is such a success that it's going to create the gold rush of video game adaptations, but we already know exists. But that people aren't going to be smart with the adaptations. And because my big fear right now is the Horizon adaptation that's currently in production with Netflix. We already know how I feel about Netflix as a production company. But Horizon is one of my favorite video game franchise stories. It's also a narrative that requires the most budget to make believable. And I'm not confident.
Is anybody from the production or development team involved with the Netflix shit?
As far as I'm aware, no.
Not the way that Neil is, at least.
Yeah. Couple that with the fact that, like, did any of y'all watch Witcher Blood Origin?
No. What?
That was the Netflix adaptation of the Witcher Origin, which is like the last thing I remember of Netflix Witcher, which I know isn't based on the games.
It has Oscar winner Michelle Yeoh in it.
Oh, jeez. That show's so bad. But yeah, so like I'm so scared. Then you've got things like Twisted Metal also being made on Peacock, and I'm like, oh, like, okay. And then you've got like God of War, and I'm like, I love Corey, but there's a lot that has to go into making God of War. Just like God of War is harder to make as good as Last of Us. Like Last of Us was literally Craig and Neil being like, all right, here's the script for the game. You wrote Chernobyl, adapt this shit, bitch. Adapt this bitch. Like, all right, and he did it.
I mean, yeah, because God of War actually might be harder to make work than Horizon too, because God of War is so not grounded. Like, even at its most grounded, it's still a story about gods beating the shit out of each other. Like, and your main character is caked in the ashes of his dead family. Like, there's a lot there that.
Yeah. Couple that with, like, we've talked about Last of Us having an aversion to action because they really wanted to dwell in the story. A lot of these games going forward, I don't want the Last of Us treatment where it's just characters talking in this world. I want that work. I want the characters to exist. I want the like Kratos has just to get the Dragon Ball Z fights with gods.
Yeah, Kratos has to fight. Kratos has a scrap because he's the god of war.
But
no, yeah, because I agree. I do agree because on one hand, it's good for the future of game adaptations because, like you said, it puts everything on notice. I completely forgot that Arcane is a video game adaptation because I don't give a shit about League. But yeah, Arcane is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I think Arcane is the gold standard for all video game adaptations, point blank. I give Last of Us a little bit of an edge up because it went live action, but I think Arcane hits on a bunch of cylinders that unfortunately Last of Us didn't hit entirely.
I will say that Arcane though is different because it's based off of a game that nobody cares about the story.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
they basically could build from the ground up and do
I will say,
whatever they wanted.
I will say, as someone who's a League of Legends lore fan, that for the most part, this is an adaptation. They made some liberties.
Oh yeah, I believe that, but I'm saying that unless you're a League fan, nobody went into Arcane because it's like, oh snap, I can't wait to see League's story like brought into life. Whereas Last of Us, that's literally the name of the game there. And but that's neither here nor there. Arcane and The Last of Us are definitely like the gold standard, and they're putting the rest of the gaming industry on notice in terms of like, if you're gonna come correct. At the same time, I don't want the same thing that happened when Christopher Nolan did the Dark Knight series, which is okay.
Or
This was a really great.
DC took that tone and ran with it.
Exactly. Like I don't want you to apply the Last of Us template to all of these other shows because the Last of Us template does not work on every other game. Just
They're
what
gonna
they need
damn
to
sure
take from
try to
it.
do it though.
Oh yeah, they will. But what they need to take from it is the level of TLC and the level of commitment and adherence to making this as good as it can be. Because now video games, one, are more popular than they've ever been, and two, video game adaptations can't just work as cash grabs anymore. No one cared whether or not the Super Mario movie was good back in the 90s. They just were like, oh, people are going to see it as a Mario Brothers movie.
Great. What are you talking about?
I will say what. It's such a fun movie to
I'm-
watch.
But you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying.
And Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat.
Well, no, I will argue that Mortal Kombat's an actually solid adaptation.
I'll argue that Mortal Kombat is super solid. Street Fighter, you just have to be in a certain state of mind to take that movie.
I'm talking about the 90s Mortal Kombat, by the way.
I know. That's the one that I like. We already know how I feel about the recent Mortal Kombat. But, okay. So, is there any closing thoughts from you guys before we wrap this up?
I've done a lot of whinging on this podcast about Last of Us, the show, and I just want to say that I loved watching the show. I had a lot of nitpicks about it, but that's because I'm coming at it from I watch a lot of media. I've had 9 weeks because of the way they made this show to sit here and dwell on my thoughts about this narrative and what they did wrong and what they did right. But that being said, I'm super excited it's made. I'm super excited with the success. I'm super excited for the future of what this means for Naughty Dog as a company. Because like Neil is now coming back to Naughty Dog as a writer who's made a successful TV show.
And is probably going to be coming back in due time as a Emmy-nominated writer and director too.
And he probably got some tips and tricks from Craig Mazin as well.
Oh, absolutely. They're like besties.
Shout out to Shannon Woodward, Sabrina from Raising Hope. She's also in Westworld, but I'll always remember her as Sabrina.
So, as not really video game adaptations, but video games moving forward, I think a lot of people will take more care crafting their narratives with hopes that it may get it. You don't think so? It'll get adapted?
I think the same way narratives are crafted now, unless people are like, I'm thinking the guy Ken Levine is going to take time crafting his narrative. That's the type of creator he is. But the guys making Guacamelee, they're going to put a narrative in their game as a framework. But what they're really focusing on is, what is the gameplay loop we can build to sell our game?
Why Guacamelee got to catch strays? I just want to throw out there that Hideo Kojima is in shambles. Somebody else got their game. Narrative-driven game made first.
I forgot that Death Stranding is getting an adaptation.
To be fair to Kojima, the Jordan Vogt Roberts Metal Gear movie has been in the ether for years, and it's not his fault that Konami's an ass and he got booted from the company.
Also,
insert Suge Knight. You tired of studios getting all up in your games? Come to Sony Studios.
And my closing thoughts is just a shout out to everybody that was involved to making this the success that it is, and I can't wait to see what this does for Belly Ramsey's career. This is one hell of a coming out party for them, and really, I think they have a very, very bright future just off the back of what they do with Ellie in this season. And if they stick with them, maybe seasons 2 onward.
You
Who
should
knows?
watch The Worst Witch. I'm just saying, that's another thing she did.
Closing statement, flagrant foul for me. Are they or are they not going to keep in the Abby sex scene?
They will keep it in.
It's HBO.
It's HBO, and Neil's like, I don't give a fuck. They're gonna keep it in.
It's HBO.
Oh god, it was cringe in the game.
She about to get them muscle cheeks clapped. She about to get.
Tell you
No, I
something,
hope she
brother.
I hope she pegs Owen. That's what I hope. That's what I hope.
I'm done.
All right,
Wash my hands.
but that has been our review of the Last of Us TV show. Thank you for rocking with us.
We'll watch again.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for rocking with us. And once again, don't forget to support us by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting that notification bell. Leave us a review if you're listening to this. And if you want in on the Discord chat, then go to pressx2start.com/Discord. Peace.